All right, I'm gonna get started here. What's up, guys? So I'm gonna be doing a review session over the study guide. My plan for this, I'll probably just go through the first half on today and then finish up with the second half on Wednesday. So let's just get started. I took some notes over here um, about going through the study guide, what I think is going to be the most important points to know for studying this test. So starting off, we're going to be looking at the lipids. So understand the composition, function, energy value, and sources. So first things is going to be the energy value. I think this was in your last exam talking about how many kcal per gram for each of the macronutrients. So like protein is 4, carbs is 4, fat is 9. So that's kind of a review there. And then bounce into the triglycerides. So you have diglyceride, monoglyceride. Those are kind of easy to remember. So like di means 2 fatty acids are attached to it. And then mono is 1 attached to the backbone, which is usually a glycerol. So, and then reesterification, know that definition, know that it's the process of reattaching a fatty acid to the backbone, so reattaching it. Moving along, we got long fatty acids, medium chain fatty acids, and then short chain fatty acids. So here is just going to be remembering the number of carbons that are associated with each of these fatty acids. So long chain is going to be 12 or more, medium chain is 6 to 10, and then short chain are less than 6. So also knowing sources, so the sources of these, so in foods is going to be important to know. So the long chain is going to be beef, pork, lamb, and most plant oils. Medium chain is going to be coconut and palm oil, and then short chain fatty acids is 3% of butter and fat. So knowing those examples is going to be important. And then moving along to other types of fatty acids. So saturated, monounsaturated, polyunsaturated. Looking at the chemistry of these molecules. So the saturated fatty acids, those are going to be no double bonds. So those are going to be able to, you're going to be able to stack those fatty acids more so they can be saturated. So saturated means like just full. So you're going to be able to stack those saturated fatty acids more because they're all single bonds. Whereas the unsaturated, those are going to have the double bonds. So mono, again, is just 1. So a monounsaturated fat is going to have 1 double bond in the chain. Then poly, so you can kind of look at it as like a monomer and a polymer. There are multiple monomers in a polymer. So a polymer is going to be more double bonds than a monomer. And a polyunsaturated fat is just 2 or more double bonds in the chain. And those are unsaturated because those are going to be a lot harder to stack. So like, as you can see with my beautiful drawing down here, like it's going to be hard to stack multiple chains of that on top of each other to get it saturated. So it's going to be unsaturated. And then it's also important, so like cholesterol here, I made a note. It's good to kind of connect information that you're learning with other parts. So like connecting cholesterol with saturated fatty acids. So if you increase your saturated fatty acid intake, so eat more saturated fat, you're going to increase your LDL cholesterol. And we'll get to that in a second, but it's good to make those connections and kind of understand how each factor impacts something else. And then another type is going to be trans fatty acids. So trans and cis. So each of these are going to be unsaturated because they have double bonds. And so a cis is going to be on the same side, and a trans is going to be on opposite side. So do whatever you need to memorize this. So like, as you can see, the carbons are in the chain regardless. You got 4 carbons, but on the cis, the hydrogens on the double bonds, the double bonded carbons, those are going to be on the same side. So that's going to cause kind of a kink in your carbon chain. Whereas on the trans right over here, they're going to be on opposite sides, so the chain is still going to be straight. So do what you need to memorize that. We'll keep on going. So now we're talking about omega-3s, which are also fatty acids. So you got 3 different types. You have ALA, EPA, and DHA. I think something important to note here, which is kind of like a practical application, is knowing what kinds of omega-3 fatty acids are in supplement form. So like if you go to the store and get like an omega-3 supplement, you're going to be getting EPA and DHA. So those are going to be the forms found in the supplement. And knowing sources for these two is going to be important. So the ALA, that's going to be from plant sources, whereas the EPA and DHA, those are going to be from fish sources. So you'll see in the nutritional world, people who are vegetarian or vegan, they're going to have hard times getting EPA and DHA because they're not consuming fish. So that's just one of the many deficiencies that some vegans have. All right, so we'll keep on moving. We'll go to phospholipids. For phospholipids, I think the main thing here is understanding the structure of it and understanding how it acts in the body. So I have here, when a phospholipid is placed in water, the phosphate head will face the water, whereas the tail of it is going to be like congregating in the middle, trying to stay away from the water. So the phosphate head is polar and hydrophilic, meaning it can interact with the water, whereas the tail is hydrophobic, like it's trying its best to stay away from the water. So do what you can to remember that, distinguish the two. Drawing a picture can kind of help with that. It's like a missile. I'll look that up right here. I think this is going to be a good visual to see it if it loads. But it's pretty much all the heads are on the outside, and then all of the tails are kind of coming in together to form like a circle. So they're all trying to stay away from the water. Sweet. Well, looks like we're not looking at it. So we'll keep on going to sterols. So here again, this structure is going to be important. It's just a lot of ringed carbons. So the carbons form a ring, and there are just many of those. And then knowing the food sources. So here you can get it through fish, eggs, meat, and then other dairy products. So I think knowing sources for all of these types of fats or lipids, same thing, is going to be important to kind of complete your understanding on what exactly it is. Okay, so this loaded. So that kind of helps. Having all of the heads facing out towards the water, and then the hydrophobic staying on the inside here, staying away from the water. So that's kind of a good visual to understand it. And then talking about cholesterol, again, LDL, eating more saturated fatty acids is going to increase your LDL. And what LDL does is it carries cholesterol to the cell. And that's commonly seen as like the bad cholesterol, and then the HDL helps kind of clear cholesterol from your system, excrete cholesterol from the body, and is known as like the good cholesterol. And then knowing like the recommendation of amount and consumption of cholesterol. So saying that cholesterol should be limited to 300 milligrams a day. I think I have a chart that was on your guys' slide deck. I have it put in here. Yeah, like right here. So knowing the levels here. So you have like for total cholesterol, anything under 200 is gonna be good. And once you start getting past 200, that's when it's gonna start getting high. And then LDL, anything above 100, or I guess 130 is going to be considered high. And then HDL is a little bit lower, just not that much in your body. It's going to be anything higher than 40. And then triglycerides, anything above about 150 is going to be considered high. So knowing this chart is going to be helpful too. So like being able to, if you're given values for a person's diet, they get blood work done and you get these levels back, you're going to have to be able to determine if you need to have the person kind of change their diet to lower their cholesterol levels, or if they're in a good optimal level of cholesterol. And so like how you would reduce the high levels of cholesterol, one example that I have here is just limit animal-based fats. So again, knowing the sources here. So just limiting like meat that can kind of help to reduce your cholesterol levels. Moving on to general recommendations of these fatty acids, the lipids. So they have in your slide deck, it was saturated fats is going to be less than 7% of your total calories, and then fat is just less than 20% of total calories. And then going to like the types of the diets, looking at the Mediterranean diet, it's up to 40% of calories from fat, and most of these fats are going to be the monounsaturated. So the single double bond unsaturated, as we talked about before. And then talking about the North American diet. So there was a little bit or quite a bit about the North American diet. So just talking about what is commonly seen, what is commonly consumed, the food sources for the macros. So kind of understanding that, understanding where the just common sources of food. So like for protein is going to be primarily from animal sources in the North American diet. And then let's talk about the digestion and absorption. So kind of going through the GI tract. I know this was hard on your last exam. It begins in your mouth. So right when you start chewing, you're breaking down starch with amylase. And then it goes to the stomach and then the intestines. So noting that most of the absorption actually occurs in the small intestine. I think that's an important point to remember. Like going throughout your I'm sure you'll see that in a ton of classes throughout your undergrad. So knowing that is going to be important. And then going through, know that bile emulsifies fat. Lipase breaks down fat into fatty acids. So lipase, if you've taken like a biology class, you'll see that anything that ends in ase is an enzyme, and enzymes usually break down stuff. So, and then lipase, so the first three is going to be like a lipid. You kind of see that, kind of break down those words to understand what exactly the enzyme is going to be attacking. So it breaks down fat into fatty acids. So the polymer fat into the monomer fatty acids. And then again, absorption occurs along the brush border. So there was a diagram that showed like the the stria of microvilli on the plasma membrane of the cell, and it's specialized for absorption. So really getting all the nutrients through that. And then let's see here, diets high in total fat can cause obesity, cardiovascular disease, colon, prostate, and breast cancer. So understanding how your consumption of certain types of fat or just total fat can kind of impact your health. So understanding that, understanding the impacts it has on your overall health. Again, the chart here, just understanding where the values are and how it's classified. So we'll move on to protein. Let's see here. So first is going to be talking about amino acids. So understanding the structure. There are quite a few amino acids, and they're broken up into essential and non-essential. And so the structure of it is going to be a carboxyl group, a hydrogen group, an amine group, and then a side chain, which I call R. Oh yeah, so back in this structure up here, and say that's like you got hydrogen, carbon, and then R. So that's just like the rest of the chain. It could be anything. Like it could be more carbons, it could be oxygen, an alcohol group, literally anything. So that's what R means. If you see that, or side chain. So, and for amino acids, the side chain, the R group, that's going to determine the structure because all the amino acids have that same stuff. It's just the R group that differs. So that is what's going to determine the structure and the function of the amino acid. And then breaking the amino acids up into the groups. So essential means that your body doesn't produce it naturally. So you're going to have to consume these amino acids from your diet. And so knowing that list, I think, is going to be important and kind of just helpful to understand. And then non-essential, of course, means that your body produces it naturally and you don't have to really consume it through your diet, but it's obviously recommended. And then conditionally essential. So these are going to be the amino acids that they're not essential. So your body makes it, but you should be consuming more of these when you're feeling sick or you're injured or you're stressed. So that'll help your body kind of combat the problems that your body's facing. And so I know all the amino acids in each of these categories. So the essential, non-essential, conditionally essential, and that'll be helpful. Moving on, we got complete, incomplete proteins, and complementary proteins. So a complete protein accounts for all the amino acids, all the essential amino acids. And I think it's important to note that a protein source that doesn't have all the essential amino acids, that can actually impact the protein quality. So not only having a few of the essential amino acids can kind of lower the protein quality. And then that kind of leads into what a complementary protein is. So if you were to be eating like a vegan, they're going to have these complementary proteins. So this is when you add 2 or more foods that are both composed of certain amount of essential amino acids. And so you pair them together so you can have all your essential amino acids. So when you combine 2+ plant protein sources to create a complete protein. And then, yeah, incomplete protein is just protein sources that don't have all the essential amino acids. Yeah, that's all I want to say about that. So moving on to peptide bonds. So these are going to be the bonds that are in between the amino acids that create these long chains of amino acids, which is the protein. So they're going to be what's holding together the amino acids. And then moving on to moving on to the more structure of the protein. So again, if you're having multiple amino acids in one chain. That's going to be or one amino acid is a primary, and then moving on to a secondary is going to be multiple chains, and then a tertiary is just multiple secondaries, and then a quaternary is just going to be multiple tertiaries. So understanding the order of these is going to be important to like understand the concept of what exactly a protein is. And I have this chart here from your guys' slide deck talking about sources, and then talking about the primary limiting amino acid. So like beans and its primary limiting amino acid, nuts and seeds, and grains. And then it also has some complementary food protein combinations. So I think looking at this list is kind of helpful to understand what like application, how you can apply a complementary food into a real life example, and just looking at those examples. And then we have like dipeptide, tripeptide. So those are 2 amino acids. Tripeptides, it's going to be 3 amino acids. And then illegal peptides is 4 to 9 amino acids. And then polypeptide is, again, poly. Once you start picking up like poly means multiple, it's going to be the largest one. So 10 and up amino acids. So those are going to be long chains. Then we'll move on to denaturing of proteins. So that means like the breakdown of protein, destroying protein's function. So it can't really like operate or function properly. And then, so protein turnover enables the cell to adapt to constant changing conditions. So what protein turnover is, it's continual renewal or replacement of the protein. So it's going to be constantly changing because its environment is constantly changing too. So it's going to continue to be able to function properly. Going to nitrogen balance. So having a negative nitrogen balance is when protein intake is less than its loss. And this can develop with low protein intake and cause serious illness or injury, whereas positive nitrogen balance is when protein intake is greater than its losses. So this occurs during growth and recovery from illness or injury, and also occurs during pregnancy. So again, seeing how these apply to the real world. So it occurs in pregnancy. So women often are seen with a positive nitrogen balance. And people who are recovering are in a positive nitrogen balance. And then talking about the digestion and absorption. So if you're cooking protein and adding heat to it, it's going to denature the protein, and it's going to soften the connective tissue in the meat. And so absorption and digestion. So digestion is going to start in the stomach for the protein, doesn't start in the mouth like for the carbs. There's nothing acidic enough to start breaking down the protein until it gets into the stomach. So that's why it starts in the stomach, and then the final digestion occurs in the small intestine, which is where the final digestion is going to be like converting the whole protein strain of all the amino acids, the polymer, going to be breaking it down into its monomer, the amino acid. So that's when the final digestion occurs in this small intestine. And then we'll look at function here. So produce collagen, actin, myosin, and some in extreme cases, like where you're extremely malnourished, it's going to be used as energy, like protein. And then it's also going to be to maintain fluid balance and maintain pH balance. So it's going to be as like a buffer. So a buffer is going to be kind of maintaining the pH, which is the acidity level. So the acid base balance. So the protein is going to kind of help maintain a healthy pH in the body, which is I think 7.35 or something. or 7.45. I think that's the range. So the protein's going to help your body stay in those levels. And once it comes out of those, the optimal levels, that's when your body starts seeing problems and gets real bad real quick. So that's why protein is such an important macronutrient. It also helps with immune function. So we also have the protein energy malnutrition. So again, talking about more deficiencies, you have marasmus. I don't know how to say that, but this develops slowly and is a severe deficiency of energy, protein, and micronutrients. And then you also have kwashiorkor, and so this one develops rapidly and is again a severe protein deficiency. And then there was a slide on your deck that talked about what these deficiencies are associated with. So this is with edema, growth impairment, and infections. I think noticing and knowing that what it's associated with is going to be helpful to know for the test, and knowing like that this occurs rapidly, so while this one occurs slowly, I think that's important too. So moving on to the food allergies. So there's a list of in your slide deck of like eight foods that can cause the most common food allergies. So I think knowing that list is important. So it's peanuts, tree nuts, milk, eggs, fish, shellfish, soy, and wheat. And then knowing food sources for all of these. I mean, like for wheat, soy, knowing examples of those is going to be important for the test. So like if you're given an example of what list of foods would pop up as or be like the most likely to cause a food allergy reaction or something like that. So knowing examples, knowing these foods is going to be important. And then here, the vegan and vegetarian. Kind of talked about this a little bit before. So this is just going to be lacking meat sources of protein. So they're going to be needing complementary protein sources. And their main source of protein is going to be from like beans, nuts, and seeds. And those are all great sources of protein. But they're not going to be having the complete protein with all the essential amino acids. So they kind of have to pair these together. And again, looking at that list of foods to see the complementary food combinations, it's going to be important. All right, so this will be our last section here, alcohol, and then we'll finish up on Wednesday. So talking about alcohol metabolism, so you have the microsomal ethanol oxidizing system, or MEOS. So this is the main system that deals with alcohol metabolism. And so as you're drinking more alcohol, this system begins to like, the rate of it begins to increase. So as intake increases, so does the activation of this system. Knowing that your stomach absorbs about 20% of the alcohol, and then the rest again is in the small intestine. That small intestine absorbs a ton of stuff. And then knowing the alcohol dehydrogenase pathway, I think this is the second one. This visual is kind of helpful just so you can see it. Knowing what enzymes. So again, this ends with ACE. Wow. So it goes to alcohol, and then through this, knowing this pathway is going to be important too. And this is just going to be for low to moderate intake. So the MEO system, that's going to be for like people who are binge drinking, some college students. This is what's going to be helping you to digest the alcohol. And I mean, this is still going to be working too. And then looking at this summary, I think this chart is super important and can kind of be like a source for everything that you need to know for alcohol metabolism. So knowing this chart, the location is going to be, so you can see the liver. So people who are alcoholics, they might have liver problems when they're older. Knowing how much alcohol is going to be associated with which pathway. So yeah, understanding that, and then also looking at the alcohol consumption patterns. So this is just going to be looking at information and data, and then pulling out like the commonalities seen in the data. So yeah, knowing percentages can kind of help you piece together the information. So like questions on the exam, you'll be able to understand what it's asking, and this is going to just help you have a better understanding of the information. So, and then knowing college students, so a whopping 70% consume alcohol, and then of that, 45% of these college students are binge drinkers, and knowing that about a third, I think it was like 31%, met the criteria for an alcohol use disorder. Knowing these statistics is important for the exam. Relationship between alcohol intake and health risk is a J-shaped curve. So that's like that on the chart or on the graph. So that means only the extremes of people of the extremes on people's intake, those can affect somebody's health risk. Another stat that's important is going to be children of alcoholics are at a 4 times greater risk of developing alcoholism. So as you'll see, you probably already saw with that lecture, alcoholism is a huge, like if it runs in your family, you're more likely to have it. I made a point down here with like genetic influences. So alcoholism is largely associated with genetic influences, about for 40 to 50% of the risk. So if it runs in your family, you're going to be more likely or more susceptible for developing alcoholism. So if that's you, it's better to know and kind of look out for that. So moving on, talking about fetal alcohol syndrome. So on the spectrum, this is going to be the most severe diagnosis. And I think there was like just a chart for, or a list of all of the disorders or the diagnosis. So kind of just understanding and knowing all of these, understanding how like alcoholism will impact your nutritional status. So like calcium, magnesium, zinc, iron, how those are going to be affected as somebody tends to drink more. So again, connecting micronutrients, minerals to increased alcohol intake. Okay, and then so again, making another connection is going to be when excess drinking occurs, there's a huge buildup of alcohol stored in the liver. As we talked about, alcoholics or people with alcoholism are going to have liver problems. And so understanding that some vitamins are stored in the liver. So understanding what those are and how those can be impacted with somebody who's going to be drinking more alcohol. So making those kind of connections. And yeah, looking at just another one like Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome is is often seen with a deficiency in thiamine, so vitamin B. Just making these type of connections. And then looking at characteristics of alcoholism. is going to be like cravings, loss of control, increase in tolerance. So you have substance tolerance. So that's just going to be like if you start off drinking 3 beers, and if you do that for a couple of days, it's not going to be enough for you to get drunk. So you're going to be upping it to 4 or 5. So that's like substance tolerance. And then also you'll have behavior tolerance. So that's going to be you knowing how, or like over time, it's going to be like you're going to be able to operate normally at the same level of like your blood alcohol level, for example. Over time, if you get to like 0.1 blood alcohol level over and over, you're going to be able to like kind of operate normally at that level with increased like experiences at that level, if that makes sense. And alcoholism is also characterized by unsuccessful attempts to cut back on alcohol use. And then got 2 more things here. So the male to female ratio of alcoholism is 4-to-1. I think that was just surprising to me. And then starting at a younger age, I'm trying to look for the slide that talked about it. I think I passed it. But the earlier that you start, okay, yeah, right here. The earlier that you start, the more likely it's going to be a problem when you're older, because your brain's developing, and you will start to develop like those behaviors of drinking at a younger age. So you'll begin to like latch onto those behaviors and do it more often. So drinking before age 14 is problematic. 45% will become alcoholics, whereas there's only a 10% risk if they wait until 21. And the stat of 40% of high school students admit to currently consuming alcohol, that's a big indicator that, you know, there's going to be a good chunk of those students are going to become alcoholics. That's just what the stats have been saying. That's what the stats say. So that's about halfway. So we'll finish up with the rest of the study guide next time on Wednesday. So that was Monday's session. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It wasn't too long. Try to go through that a little bit quick. But if you guys have questions about anything that we're going over, anything on the study guide, anything on any of the slide decks, quizzes, practice exam, shoot me an email. I'd love to help you guys out. And yeah, good luck studying.